G'day everybody, it's Dr. Justin Coulson, and it's been a while since I've done any story time, and I thought it might be nice to share something with you that I think will kind of rock your world. It's a new view of things that really challenges what we're used to, and it's all about praise. I wrote about this in my book, 9 Ways to a Resilient Child, and the name of the chapter is called Good Praising: Why Praise is a Problem in Promoting Resilience. Most people don't realize just how damaging praise can be if we get it wrong, and that there are a whole lot of things that are better than praise for our children. So I'm going to do a little bit of story time with you. I want to share a couple of things that I think you're going to really enjoy. So settle in, listen up. Here we go. This is from chapter 5 of 9 Ways to a Resilient Child. One of the most persistent myths in parenting generally, and specifically related to resilience, is that to boost well-being, self-esteem, and resilience, we need to pump up our children's tires. We need to praise them. Parenting experts consistently push praise as a permanent part of their platform for raising resilient children. If you look up praise on the internet, you'll be inundated with well-meaning advice describing how many times we ought to praise children to help them to be resilient. The argument is that praise provides important scaffolding that helps children believe they are capable and competent. Praise is said to be a resilience booster because when children experience the all too certain setbacks of life, they can rely on our praise to sustain them and help them bounce back. However, the idea that we should be catching our children doing something right and praising them for it may be less useful for resilience than we think. The research literature is far less effusive in its praise of praise. In fact, many studies, just like mine, point to praise as ineffective or even downright dysfunctional. The beginning of the chapter, the first 3 or 4 pages, I outline a study that I did at the University of Queensland where praise turned out to be absolutely counterproductive to everything that it's supposed to do. So what are the arguments for praise? I'm just going to summarize them rather than reading it. First of all, most people say it reinforces the behavior you want. It increases motivation. It's an incentive to increase engagement in a task, and it can make a child believe that they're as good as the person praising them says they are. And praise is broadly accepted as important. But what I want to read to you now are the arguments against praise. The detrimental effects of praise are surprising and have been studied for several decades now. One of the most interesting findings applies to children around the ages of 5, 6, or 7. These children, when praised, will often decide that the reason they're being praised is not because they're great, but because they're not very good at all. The thinking goes, if I've done well and I'm not getting praised, it's because they expect it of me. They must think I'm smart. But if I've done well and I am getting praised, it's because they were surprised, so they must think I'm dumb. When little children accept most of what they hear as gospel truth, while little children accept most of what they hear as gospel truth, when slightly older children hear us telling them how kind they are, or how smart, or how good at drawing or sharing they are, they feel judged, evaluated. And this is particularly the case for children with low self-esteem. We give more effusive praise to the kids who need it most, and they seem to understand this. Kids with high self-esteem and resilience accept the praise with a shrug and a, yep, I know. It doesn't impact them at all. But those with low self-esteem and resilience have an internal argument. Mum just told me that I'm really smart, but she doesn't know I just fluked that word on the spelling test. The more evaluative and inflated the praise, the more judged children feel and the greater the negative impact. In one recent study, researchers considered the impact of inflated praise as opposed to normal praise. Inflated praise is the kind of praise that goes over and above good drawing or nice picture. Inflated praise is, wow, that's not just beautiful, it's incredibly beautiful. You have a gift. Once again, parents give inflated praise because they think that their praise will elevate their child's self-esteem. And it seems logical that children with lower self-esteem would likely receive more praise, particularly of the inflated variety. The data showed that inflated praise is given about twice as much as regular praise when parents are working with a child who has low self-esteem. In this case, the praise is actually causing harm because the child is actively arguing against it and reinforcing negative self-beliefs. Inferences of low ability are bad for resilience and for motivation. The second way that praise might reduce our children's resilience and well-being is that it can be seen as controlling. Whether we mean it or not, there can be sometimes an element of control or even manipulation as we try to socialize our children through positive feedback. And I've mentioned a study there, but I want to move quickly through this so that I can wrap it up for you. Praise can also leave children feeling that we are usurping their autonomy because we don't have the belief that they'll do the right thing without our reinforcement. I overheard a school teacher say to her students, "I love the way that everyone is sitting so quietly and working so well." But several students were not doing that at all. She was using praise as a cover for coercion and manipulation. Third, many researchers and parents have discovered that praise does lead to increased effort and motivation sometimes, but many studies have identified that once setbacks or failures arrive, children wonder whether that praise was a mistake. They feel they can't live up to the expectation. The bar is too high. Praise sets up a label that creates pressure and leads to self-doubt. I wish I could read more to you, but I want to be sensitive to your time. But over the next few pages, I talk about a few reasons that praise is all wrong. I also talk about Carol Dweck and her work on praising the person and not the process, and why that science isn't particularly strong, and why the science around praise suggests something counter to what Carol Dweck talks about with her growth mindset stuff. And ultimately, at the end of the chapter, I talk about all the things that we should do instead of praising our children, because frankly, I can't tell you not to do something without filling in the gap with something else. I'll give you just one example of that, but in the back of the chapter, I've actually got several other examples. The example that I want to share is this: use gratitude instead of praise where possible. Of course, gratitude can be coercive and agenda-driven, but it is less likely to be when compared with praise. We're unlikely to say excitedly to our 2-year-old boy, "Thanks for being such a good boy," or "Thanks for running." Instead, we might say, "I really appreciated it when you shared with your sister or your friend. It made me grateful for you." 9 Ways to a Resilient Child is the book where I talk about everything that's wrong with praise and why it's bad for resilience. The next chapter is about why competition is bad for resilience. And there's a whole lot more in there that I think will make all the difference if you want to raise resilient children, children who are strong in the face of adversity. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you'd like more info, 9 Ways to a Resilient Child by me, Dr. Justin Coulson.